Welcome back to the Hardware Unbox podcast for episode 108. There's two main topics that we're going to be talking about in this week's episode. We are going to be looking at LG's software installation in the background, bloatware, privacy concerns thing that we've seen with their monitors that Gamers Nexus reported on. So I'll give some additional thoughts as someone that has tested a lot of LG monitors and other brands and the issues with this. We're also going to look at the latest DLSS 5 updates from Nvidia's recent SIGGRAPH presentation. Some very interesting changes that we've seen compared to the original presentation that I guess they gave towards the start of this year. Not that we've looked into that in depth or anything, but we'll just give some thoughts based on what we have seen so far. So let's get into it. For the first time in a long time on this podcast, we're going to be kicking this podcast off with a monitors story. We don't often talk about monitors on this show, even though obviously we cover a lot of monitors on Monitors Unboxed. But this week I saw quite an interesting topic come up from Gamers Nexus, who I guess uncovered in a way that, LG's been doing some dodgy stuff and Windows, potentially Microsoft Windows, by installing some, what I would think is bloatware, unnecessary software, through the Windows Update system once you plug in an LG Ultra Gear gaming monitor. You don't need to plug it in through USB or anything like that. You just plug it in via DisplayPort. It triggers this software to be downloaded automatically. And people are very upset about this. I'm upset about this. I think it sucks. And so I'm interested to also get some of your thoughts on it in just a moment. But first of all, have you seen this story or video from Gamers Nexus?
I'm aware of the story. I haven't had a chance to watch the whole video yet, but I've watched snippets of it. I think I've got the highlights. I've also got the gist of it, which you just summarized. And yeah, it's pretty bad. I don't have any LG monitors that I use in the office. So they're all MSI, Gigabyte, and Asus. But I do have an LG TV, as I mentioned multiple times on the podcast before. Yeah, I mean, it's very dodgy. I'm not sure what else to say.
So there's a couple of interesting things to sort of work through with this one. I guess I should probably give a bit more of an explanation of what exactly is going on here, because there's a couple of things that people are upset about with this one, not just related to the bloatware angle, but essentially what appears to be happening, and Gamers Nexus showed this happening on their systems, and I'll talk a little bit about what happens on my systems in a moment. But essentially, you buy an LG Ultra Gear monitor. There's many of them, many different variants. It doesn't appear to be isolated to just one model or anything. You can buy multiple different models. You plug it in to your computer. Of course, you can plug in monitors over USB to get additional functionality, but this doesn't appear to require that. You just plug it in via DisplayPort or HDMI. Windows Update then detects that your monitor has been installed or attached to the computer, and it starts downloading and installing, I guess, LG's drivers for this. But in this particular case, it's not really a driver for a monitor because monitors don't need drivers. They just work straight out of the box. It starts downloading LG's app installer software, which then proceeds to install other things such as potential bloatware in the form of McAfee, which I think used to be classed, I guess, as an antivirus. I think most people these days would class this as bloatware, unnecessary software, garbage, the sort of thing you don't want on your PC at all. And so this all is sort of happening in the background automatically. And Gamers Nexus has noticed pop-ups coming up sort of saying, hey, do you want to extend your McAfee coverage? The usual thing you'd see when buying a laptop and it's preloaded with bloatware. It starts spamming you to extend your coverage or to just install McAfee in the first place. We've seen user reports sort of suggesting this. And then I guess the second part of the story as well was the privacy angle. So when this app is installed, there's some privacy concerns around data collection, scanning of your screens, scanning of the audio potentially from your device and sending that back to LG. And because it is installed automatically once you plug in your monitor, there's no user consent that's given here. It's basically just operating by itself to do all of this sort of thing. And so that is kind of what's been happening here. On my systems, what I've seen is a little different to what Gamers Nexus has reported because I do use LG monitors on both my gaming system at the moment and also my workstation. On my workstation, I've just got an LG 32-inch 4K monitor. It's an Ultra Gear gaming monitor. No installation of anything on that particular device. So as far as I can tell, it hasn't automatically triggered any updates. On my gaming PC, I did already manually install the app installer on that to run a software update for another monitor that I was testing. So it's unclear whether that device would have automatically installed it. And I did notice that it installed on my B-roll PC, which I use for all the B-roll that you see in the monitor reviews. It did install on that PC automatically, but was deactivated in the background. So for whatever happened there, for some reason, it installed it by itself through Windows Update. But when you look in sort of the startup app menu in Windows, it was automatically set to disabled. And I'd never seen any sort of pop up or interaction. But the app was there on the PC when I looked at it. So I'm not quite sure what would trigger the app to start automatically running or showing you pop ups, because obviously that's not a very good experience. But that's just personally what I've experienced so far. And obviously we've seen a lot of user reports saying that there's varying levels of cases that there's been. So I've seen people say similar, that the app's present on their PC, but hasn't been showing pop-ups. And then some people have gotten the pop-ups. The other thing that I should also mention relating to this is that LG are not the only brand that does this. I think LG are probably the most bad at doing it because of the McAfee stuff. However, if you plug in an Asus monitor, for example, some of them will prompt you to download Asus's, I think it's like widget software or something. This is done, again, you don't have to plug it through USB. You plug it in through DisplayPort. It starts auto-downloading, I guess, this pop-up. But the difference that we see relative to the LG monitor is that there's no installation of the software unless you click the please install the software button that comes up on your screen. Similar with Alienware monitors, they can sometimes install the Dell Center or whatever, but it won't start operating until you click like start using this, please. And then probably I'm not sure how often you've seen this testing motherboards and things like that, but sometimes I've seen, you start using an MSI motherboard or whatever, and then it starts automatically trying to get you to install the MSI Dragon Center, whatever it's called.
Yeah,
these
I
days.
don't think MSI does that. I don't think ASRock does that. Gigabyte definitely does that. And Asus might as well on some of their boards. I know Gigabyte does. I get the pop-up all the time if I have a Gigabyte board within Windows, but I don't think I've had it on MSI. Anyway, that's really annoying. I was going to say, in my opinion, I know it's meant to be like more, well, in a perfect world, it would be more user-friendly, wouldn't it? To have this nice pop-up. Here are the drivers. Here's an easy way to configure your system. But of course, we don't live in a perfect world, and it's always weaponized to make the user experience worse. A company where that may not be true, but I still hate it. And I say this because I don't have that much experience, but I hate using a Razer mouse or something like that.
Oh, I was going to mention Razer as well, because they do this. Is so bad.
It's so bad. It was just earlier today, for the first time in several months. It might even be the first time this year. I plugged in a Razer product, which I try to avoid at all costs. We're not getting a Razer sponsorship because I hate Razer products. Balin loves it. What is it? The Basilisk or something? V3 mouse loves it.
I use the Death Adder. I think it's great, but yeah, I have to like nuke the software basically because it's complete crap.
I plugged it in this new system. You get a pop up, and I'm trying to get rid of it. And if you unplug the mouse and plug it back in, it does it all over again. It's like, you must install the software or we're going to keep annoying you every time you plug it in. That is just a horrible user experience. And while I get that, even if it did download a driver or some software that made it better to customize and use the product, and that's all, nice. And I get why that could be useful for more novice users, but it's still just, I don't know, I think overall garbage experience. You don't want that crap popping up every time you move from like your laptop to your desktop, especially if you don't want to install their software. Either you don't need those options or you just find it bloatware or whatever. I'm just not a fan of that experience at all. And so that's why I don't use Razer products, or one of the reasons why.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And obviously there's a couple of different mechanisms that brands can use to do that sort of thing. When you plug in a USB device, you can sort of just basically auto run anything. That tends to be quite problematic. I think the thing that surprised people with the monitor side of things was that this is done without plugging it in over USB, that it's more done via a Windows update mechanism, which is... So I feel like there's kind of two parties to blame here, and I almost blame them. I don't know whether I could blame Microsoft more for this problem, but the first problem, I guess, is that LG software has McAfee as part of it. That's obviously problematic. McAfee is garbage. No one uses it. It's complete bloatware, as I mentioned earlier. This is not software you want on your PC, and bundling it in with LG software is clearly some sort of like quid pro quo sponsorship deal or paid product placement. So that's not good. Like, you don't want unnecessary apps being installed or even suggested to be installed when you download a first-party piece of software from LG. So that's I guess problem number one. Then there's the privacy side of things. Obviously, a lot of apps do these sorts of tracking things these days. Ideally, you'd want to opt into that by manually installing the software and accepting it, not have it installed in the background. So obviously that's problematic. But then the biggest issue for me, I guess, is why is Windows allowing why is Windows allowing this? Like, Microsoft should not be letting LG even attempt to do this automatic installation. It should be restricted to necessary driver software. So, for example, you plug in your Wi-Fi dongle or new network device or something that actually might require a driver or an updated driver, and it just installs the driver. You don't plug in your new, USB Wi-Fi dongle and it goes, hey, I'm going to install the Wi-Fi dongle utility in the background and then have it do pop-ups and then have it install bloatware. No, it just installs the driver. So why Microsoft is allowing these companies to bundle software applications through Windows Update and have them install automatically. I mean, I'm not surprised that Microsoft is doing this because Windows is garbage these days, but surely that's bad, right? Like, they should not be allowing that to happen.
It's definitely bad. They definitely shouldn't be allowing it to happen, but they're almost certainly allowing it to happen because of money.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you had a net worth of about $25 billion with another $60 billion in assets, and you were willing to give a portion of that to Microsoft, that'd allow you to do basically anything.
Yep.
So that's your answer, I would say. I don't know why exactly they did it, but outside of money, that's really all I got for you.
Yeah, I don't know whether it could be lax guidelines for whatever they're allowing people to put through Windows Update. So it started off as this, I'm sure someone at Microsoft somewhere years ago, they're probably been fired and replaced by AI now, had some good intentions and was like, I'll develop this system so that, a user doesn't have to go on to, remember back in the day, you have to find your Realtek audio drivers, and that website was extremely slow and took ages to download your audio drivers. And so you develop a system. Users don't have to download drivers anymore. It's just done in the background. And then it gets abused and downgraded and made worse over time.
So if not money, negligence is what you're saying.
I mean, yeah, essentially, if there's no one at Microsoft checking what is being deployed through this system, then yeah, negligence, yeah.
All right. Well, I guess neither of those things are good. Not confidence inspiring for those using Windows software, but Microsoft software. Anyway, yeah, I mean, it's not good. And yeah, who's this damaging the reputation of more? Or would you say it's somewhat equally? So LG or Microsoft, who's taking the bigger hit, the bigger PR hit here?
I think LG is taking the bigger hit just based on the articles that I've seen largely focusing on LG. Obviously on Monitor Unbox, we're starting to get quite a lot of comments from people saying, don't buy an LG monitor because it installs bloatware. And honestly, fair enough. So I wouldn't want to recommend a monitor that you plug in and it installs McAfee software on your system. That's complete shit.
So Samsung's not doing this, and any of the other. So it's not like a Dieselgate type situation where LG was caught first and took the brunt of the storm, but the others were doing it. Because I don't really know.
I think it's partly that. Some brands definitely don't do this. I'm actually testing a Samsung monitor at the moment. I don't believe it does this on that monitor. There are other brands as well that I believe don't do it. Funnily enough, Gigabyte is one of the brands that I know for sure doesn't do it.
Yeah.
So they don't install utilities in the background. But as I mentioned, there are brands that will not necessarily install full software, but will certainly install something on your system that may prompt you to then install software. So Dell, as I mentioned, does this. Asus does this as well. But it's not installing the full software. It's more just, hey, you've plugged in our monitor. Did you want to install the full software suite? And so I think on the Asus example, it gives you this small black pop-up in the middle of the screen. And basically you just click either yes, install it, or cancel, and then it goes away. It never shows you again until you potentially plug in a new Asus monitor and it starts this download process again. Now, I'm assuming that because I've only plugged in the monitor over DisplayPort, that it's doing this via Windows Update. It's maybe deploying some sort of small driver package. I know there are some brands as well that use Windows Update to install things like ICC profiles. So color profiles for the monitor can be deployed through there as sort of this driver update scenario. But in terms of like fully installing the software in the background without the user's consent, I'm not aware of any other brands going that far, or at least doing it in a way that would start up the application, give you pop-ups, annoy you, and all that sort of thing. So yeah, LG is the worst that I've seen as far as that is concerned.
So since Gamers Nexus broke this story, I think it's probably fair to credit them with breaking the story, and it's blown up, and there's a lot of online outrage, rightfully so, from those who own LG products and even those who don't. Have we got any clarifying statements from LG?
I haven't seen or heard anything from them about this. Not that
Yeah.
to be fair, I've only just been getting into this story for this podcast, so I haven't gone and sent them any questions myself just yet. But I don't think I've seen anything from them.
I just Googled it quickly, and Tech Radar apparently is reporting you can stop LG monitors that are reporting bloatware on your Windows 11 PC, but the fix shouldn't require this much effort. So LG clarified that McAfee is not installed automatically and requires active user consent, addressing recent concerns. So apparently LG has... Now, we reached out to LG for a statement. It has denied claims of auto McAfee installations. So that LG themselves are saying it doesn't automatically install without the user's consent.
Sure, but if you see a pop-up being like install McAfee, right, is that like, obviously that's not installing the full software. I don't know, maybe they've changed that. Or...
I was laughing before in my head when you were talking about these things that you consent to or whatever. And it's like, if these deliberately misleading or just overwhelming, user agreements or statements or whatever it is they make, if they were even remotely transparent, nobody's like,
that's
hello,
right. Yeah.
Hello, I'm your LG TV. This is of no benefit to you and is to your detriment, but we would like to monitor you, collect your data, and send that to unknown third parties so they can take potential advantage of you in the future. Would you like us to do that? Yes or no? Like, nobody's saying, oh, yeah, that sounds okay. I reckon that'd be fine. Do that. Like, so all of these, basically what you're saying is nobody should be clicking yes to that if they know what they're actually clicking yes to, and it's of no benefit to them. So as a paying customer, it shouldn't even be presented to them in the first place.
That's right. And even with the McAfee pop-up, like, okay, so it's not potentially it's not installing it. Maybe it was at one point. They've changed it, so now it's not. Whatever the case is, I don't really care. The McAfee pop-up or any pop-up of any kind suggesting to install third-party software on a monitor that you plug in via DisplayPort, you never consent to installing the app or whatever, is a complete garbage user experience. If LG comes out and says, well, actually, we showed the pop-up, but we didn't technically install McAfee software. No. Don't show the pop-up. Don't mislead anyone to try and accidentally install or click on or get McAfee on your PC at all.
Yeah, if there was things we could get every consumer on the same page about, it would be like when you buy a laptop, which they're obviously the worst culprits for
riddled
this.
with this stuff.
But whenever you hand over any sum of money for a physical product, whatever it is, when you pay for a thing, it cannot under any circumstances have McAfee or Norton or any of that bullshit pre-installed or linked to or mentioned or exist in any capacity. Because as far as I'm concerned, those things became the viruses a long time ago.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
We're talking decades ago. They were genuine products, genuine virus scanners for a blip in time.
Yeah, then they became insidious money-grabbing devices for people who don't know better, who feel they're often, you're effectively pressured into via pop-ups and all these warnings that, your McAfee software is out of date, or you need to pay more to get, the full coverage subscription because our 60-day pre-installed bloatware trial is expired. How is that still, like, you can see why people buy Apple devices, like, because Apple doesn't do this. You can see why people are like, oh, yeah, I would rather not have all this crap to deal with, right?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm willing to go that far with this conversation, but I see where you're going with it.
Well,
Just you're going a bit far with the Apple example, but
well, they're simpler devices, you know. Not I personally wouldn't buy one either, but I'm just saying you
yeah,
don't
yeah,
get annoying pop-ups. And
yeah.
maybe Microsoft would be more competitive in the high-end laptop market and get more people on board with these devices if this didn't happen. But
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
Microsoft, yeah, they just like their money, and the OEMs like the money side of things. My
Mm-hmm.
other problem with this is just I've used a lot of these monitor utilities. They play, you know, they advertise, oh, you can change these settings from our utility, and you know, please install this because we've got all these features. I have not used a single one of these tools that is good. They're all awful. They're all slow. They all are janky. Most of them, especially from, I would say, the non US brands, have poor English translations. It's not really clear what they're doing. Often, you know, you have to use them for firmware updates and they just don't work or don't detect the monitor properly. Just a complete nightmare, garbage software most of the time. I rarely install them during review processes. I rarely look at them during review processes because I do not recommend that anyone install these unless it is absolutely critical for some reason. Like, for
It's
example, you need to do a firmware update. You should run the firmware update and then uninstall that software as quick as you possibly can.
yeah, it's the same thing with motherboard software for the most part as well. There's generally better third-party apps to control lighting and stuff like that, and generally configure fan speeds and fan curves in the BIOS, not in Windows-based software, because it does tend to be a bit bloaty. Um, I think I've asked you this question before, and I think I vaguely remember the answer, but are there any monitors that you can USB connect to your computer that then through their provided software you can tinker with, like, what would be the on-screen display stuff? Like you can
Yeah, that's what I was referring to. A lot of that software
okay,
does do that. But
okay.
it's
It's
like I
slow, is
said,
it?
it's pretty. It can often take multiple seconds to initiate any sort of change. So if it's
Okay.
like I want to change the monitor mode, you press apply or whatever, and then it takes a long time to actually
Right.
initiate that change. It's a bit slightly better than the old days where it would try to do it over the display connector via what it was called, like DDI or something like that, where they sort of have that ability to change some settings not over USB. But even with the USB versions, yeah, it's very, very slow. And I've asked companies about, you know, why it's so slow. Like, can you just make it fast? Because the OSD is relatively fast to use most of the time.
Yeah, I think so.
And yeah, basically the answer I've gotten back relating to that is that it's to do with a lot of like validation checks and stuff, which is it has to happen on the PC, then on the monitor, then the PC has to check the monitor settings again, and all these reads of what the OSD is doing is slow. Like it's just slow process, and current hardware, there's no way around it. So
Okay.
until that improves, my recommendation is just use the OSD via the little toggle thing on the monitor because it is
Mm.
easier and faster.
Yeah,
So,
you'll only break one monitor every 6 months trying to use that.
well, yes, that's right. I mean, some of the software, I think they've added in things like if you're in certain apps, it can turn the monitor into certain modes and stuff, which maybe some people find useful.
Mhm.
I feel like you should probably the monitor should just work nicely for any app in its
Yeah.
default mode. But
Some of those monitor menus are pretty easy to navigate, and some of them are horrible.
some of them are bad. Yeah.
Real bad.
Yeah. Yeah, so as far as like the LG reviews and stuff are concerned, it's disappointing because a lot of LG products they make decent hardware. So you know, if there's a unique product, there's some products that only they make. The recent 5K monitor that we looked at is kind of the only option if you want that specific hardware right now. So it's disappointing to be able to have to basically tell people, well, don't buy that monitor because you know, there's this bloatware side of things. Like, obviously, you could still buy it anyway and deal with the bloatware if you really want to. But yeah, I'm just, until this is a solved problem, I find it very difficult to sort of say, hey, go buy a monitor that's going to annoy you with pop ups. It's a terrible user experience. And like a lot of other u- user experience problems with monitors, it's something that I would be recommending against. I'd recommend a monitor from a brand that doesn't do that if there was, you know, multiple options available. So, yeah, we'll be sort of seeing how that goes. Hopefully, LG calm down a bit on the way that they're doing this. Ideally, not install this app at all. Certainly remove pop ups, even if you do install the app. And then Microsoft really should just go and validate what they're deploying to people over Windows Update. This should not be being deployed. They should not allow you to deploy this. They should not allow any company to deploy this. I think it's unacceptable that they use Windows Update in this way. Don't use it to install software. just drivers. And even then, right, the other day I was using a Radeon GPU, and Windows Update was overwriting the latest Radeon drivers with an old version, and I had to use the DDU feature to
Yeah, yeah.
prevent driver installations, which has never happened to me before on Nvidia GPUs. Hasn't really happened on AMD for me before either. But just when I was putting together, I think it was that Radeon software guide, it was happening to me a few times. I'm like, what is Windows doing? Like, clearly it was an older version, but just things like that just really annoy me about how Windows works, and they really should be putting more effort into solving.
Yeah, it's a pain in the backside. Whenever I'm testing new games, I have to check every single time that the right display drivers are actually installed and that Windows hasn't decided to just randomly revert back to some outdated driver that doesn't work properly. So that's the thing that has caught me out in the past. It's a pain in the butt. But I've while we're talking about LG, I remember 5 years ago now, you had a run-in with LG
Mhm.
that you had to end up dealing with the higher ups. There was a discussion and
Yeah,
where
that was over editorial direction sort of stuff
yeah,
relating
yeah.
to reviews.
Yep.
So yeah,
So
they have a track record of doing some dodgy stuff, don't they?
yeah, they do. They're certainly, yeah, leaning into it these days. So anyway, yeah, it was 5 years ago that you made a video series about or a video about that got quite
Yep.
a lot of coverage.
Yeah, that's right. They did change a lot of things relating to that internally regarding the review process. So, the whole, I don't know whether they do it with other creators, of course. I'm just speaking from my experience, but yeah, no more suggestions of, oh, we'll just pay you to have our opinions in the review, or to have a positive review. I think if in that situation back then with LG, it was going to be a positive review, or a largely positive review of the product anyway. So it didn't really make a lot of sense why they were sort of suggesting this whole editorial control thing. But yeah, I mean, that was sort of around that time when a few of those things were happening, weren't they? Back 5 years ago, there's
Yeah, well, even
a
the
lot
Nvidia
of
one
that.
was just as silly because we were recommending a lot of the
Mm,
Nvidia products and technologies. It just wasn't, that we were fully endorsing all of them, and that's what
mm.
they weren't happy with. Anyway,
Yes, an interesting one. So we'll keep an eye on LG and what they're doing with their monitor software, and other brands as well, because installing stuff in the background is not good.
mhm.
And yes, one other thing that I do want to mention is I did see some confusion from people, at least in the Monitor Unbox comments, relating to the privacy side of things. There was some concerning language in a lot of those privacy documents about screen recording, audio recording, and that sort of thing. Um, just to, I guess, give people some sort of peace of mind, is that at least if you're plugging your monitor in over DisplayPort, it is very difficult from a hardware perspective for a monitor to actually do this. Monitors don't usually have hardware built into them in the scaler to scan the screen and send it back the other way up the DisplayPort cable. As far as I'm aware, that's actually not physically possible. And same with audio as well. Most monitors physically don't have microphones in them. You can tear it down and have a look if you really want to. You will not find microphones in monitors. Some smart monitors that use smart processing may have those features in them. However, most standard monitors do not have microphones. So I think the way that they're meaning this in the privacy documents is more relating to, you install the software, and then the software on the PC side may be, capturing the screen and capturing the audio of whatever content you're playing. And certainly TVs can do this. So don't get me wrong. An LG TV is probably, in most likely, you know, recording the screen and sending it back, and being a bit dodgy with the privacy side of things. But monitors don't typically have this hardware. So if you're concerned that it's currently spying on you in that sense, I don't think that's what they're doing.
Well, I feel like we're at a point in time now where products any brand of product, whether it's a monitor, a soundboard, a speaker, whatever it is, needs to there needs to be some sort of clear certification that this product contains a microphone,
Mm,
and or camera. Because my soundbar, my creative soundbar has a microphone in it for some of the functionality that I've never ever used. And I logged into Discord to talk to Balin at one point, and I hadn't logged out, but I'd muted my mic, and it switched over to the soundbar, and I'm talking, and Balin's like, "I can still hear you, but it sounds weird." And it was
mm,
going through the soundbar, like, because Windows just decided to automatically. I think when sometimes Discord when you mute your mic, it says can't detect device. Something auto changed. I'm not sure what setting I had on. And that's when I discovered my soundbar has a microphone, that I didn't know about. So I was like, well, that's annoying. I want to use the soundbar, but I want to disable that microphone and never, ever use it. Like, I don't want it to be there. So I would probably get a different soundbar without a microphone. But, so many products now have like little embedded cameras to do things. And yeah, I feel like it should be very clear which products do and don't have microphones now, because they can be interfaced with your PC or other devices so easily to record things when you don't even know they are. And, the LG TVs are a good recent example of that.
Yeah, well, I mean, the whole privacy angle side of things, it gets to this point where, I mean, surely these days everyone acknowledges that these privacy documents are just ludicrous and no one reads them. You just click, accept or whatever.
It's by design.
Which is, yeah, obviously it's by design, but surely at some point, laws kind of have to catch up to this acknowledgement that no one is actually reading these documents and companies are clearly using them to slide in nefarious language.
Yeah, you're buying a TV not to get, you don't want to have your lawyer go over buying. It's absurd, right?
And no one's reading 20,000 words to use a monitor.
But the TV shouldn't be out to get you. They should be trying to sell you a good product and a service. So, but if you had the option of buying, your LG OLED TV and there was version blank, like it just no microphone, no camera, it was
dumb TV back in the old days.
Well, it can have smart TV functionality. It just doesn't have an embedded microphone and or camera or any kind of sensor like that. And then there was a super smart model that could like respond to voice commands or, hand gestures and things like that. I would opt for the base model. It doesn't have that BS personally. And it'd be nice to have that option of not having that crap in your TV, because I don't want my OLED TV having a microphone in it. Like,
well,
I'm never using that.
And don't quote me on this. Maybe we can find some articles to put on screen to show this. But I believe that some TV manufacturers have used data collection as a way to offset the cost of the hardware. So they essentially offer you the hardware for cheaper, and even offer you the hardware at a loss, and then make up the money on the back end by selling the screen captured data to data aggregators.
That's why your TV loses its mind when you don't log into it.
Oh, yeah, and don't have it plugged into the internet or whatever. And it's like, I'm sorry, but I cannot operate I'm a display device that only should be displaying images, but if I'm not connected to the internet,
it thinks you're taking advantage of the system by not giving your data.
Yeah, so, you're costing us money by buying this monitor and not using it just to display stuff. I honestly feel like there has to be some sort of, I mean, companies aren't going to do this right. So basically like laws or regulations or whatever, that basically outlines clearly whether they're selling your data or not. And in plain language, like whether it has to be a sticker on the box or something that's basically the "we do steal and sell your data" sticker. And if they're doing it, they have to put it on the box. And if they don't, they get fined billions of dollars or something. Like,
I totally agree.
It's never going to happen.
But, I look to the future where it does happen, and now TVs are 3 times the price, and everyone's like, Tim, you screwed us.
But the thing is, though, maybe they could still sell you the cheap one that has the spying stuff, so long as you know that that's why it's cheaper.
Sure. Yeah.
Anyway. Do you want to talk about our second topic for this podcast, which is DLSS 5?
I haven't. I'll be perfectly honest. I haven't looked much at the DLSS 5 stuff. I know I sent it to you, and all right. So, do we want to talk about it?
Let's. Okay. I mean, I have looked at it, but like obviously, so to give people clarity what we're about to talk about, Nvidia did a recent presentation at SIGGRAPH talking about DLSS 5 and how it works. This was recently published to YouTube. Lots of people have watched it to sort of get a better idea of how DLSS works. Now, the entire presentation is long. I think it goes for about an hour or more than an hour. I have not watched the entire hour of this. I have looked at snippets of it. So that is my sort of surface level look at this. And that's mainly because I'm not that interested in DLSS 5 technology. I wasn't hyped about it when it was first announced. So I don't really have it in me to sit through an hour of a presentation on how it works just yet. So that's why I haven't watched it, or at least haven't watched much of it. However, of course, there has been some things to come out of this because they have kind of showed a bit more about how it works. including things like the developer integration that they'll have in terms of sliders for various different things inside of, I guess, the tools that are available. So they've shown these two global controls for DLSS 5, structure intensity and tone intensity. Developers will have the ability to control those depending on how much DLSS 5 they want to apply. Obviously, they've also got the masking ability for different objects in scene. So it's able to detect certain objects and you can apply different masking to different objects. And then the different models as well that they're offering, model A, B, and C, which they claim are sort of differently trained. So developers can choose to use them depending on what sort of final output that they would like and all that sort of thing. So that's kind of what they've showed off. And I guess my initial reaction to seeing these images is that they have significantly toned down what they showed compared to the original demonstration where people were sort of looking at the AI slop stuff. And so, yeah, this latest version is it's both less intense than it was, but also as a result, in my opinion, much less transformative.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this. We were wondering how they were going to turn this around. We felt they had a lot on the line with DLSS 5. They really needed the gaming community to accept it. A thing they could continue to develop and work on. And that seemed unlikely given the initial feedback from gamers. So what do you do then? I guess you turn it right down and like drip feed it to people. Like, okay, we went too heavy on this. We're going to have to take baby steps here and get people used to the idea. And then once they're used to it, then they'll accept it and we can move forward with it. I guess is the strategy.
Yeah, I think they almost stuck between, I guess, a rock and a hard place, as the saying goes, right? Because the intense version that they showed is the version where there's significant visual changes. So you can sort of see what DLSS 5 is actually doing, and you can sort of decide for yourself, do you want that or do you not want that? But it did, in the demonstrations that they showed, significantly change the visuals of the game, which is sort of, like the whole ray tracing thing, right? We sort of wanted this technology to actually provide a visual difference because otherwise there is no point running the technology at all, right? Like if you're costing you performance for no or very limited visual change, people get very upset, as we've seen from the ray tracing generation. So it took until we sort of started to get these path tracing examples, which were much more significant in their visual changes, that people sort of go, okay, well, now we're sort of seeing the difference that ray tracing can make. So the initial demonstration was kind of like the full ray traced version where they're sort of, here's the big transformation. And then people were like, hey, but I don't like that transformation. So then they turned down the level that they're doing it. And at least in these demonstrations, it doesn't make that much of a change, at least based on what they've shown. It's sort of like minor changes here and there, especially when they were showing some of the examples with the filter only applied on a very low level. The changes were very subtle. And so if you're creating this system that only creates subtle changes, you're then back in that ray tracing problematic zone where I'm assuming this feature is going to be quite performance intensive because of how it works.
Yeah.
But then if it doesn't do much visually, game developers are not going to necessarily be on board with it.
Yeah, but all the fanboys can be like, but do you have DLSS 5 support? It's transformative. Games look crap without it. You can't use a Radeon GPU. I guess, is that what they're betting on happening again? Because that's absolutely what happened the first time around. You couldn't entertain buying a GPU that didn't, support hardware accelerated ray tracing and so on and so forth. Yeah, they're saying this now runs on like a single 5090 as if that's some amazing accomplishment and everyone's going to enjoy it. So absolutely not. This seems extremely unlikely that you're going to enjoy this in any capacity on like a 5060 Ti, possibly even like a 5070 Ti. So,
well, the demonstration that they showed, as far as I'm aware, largely was focusing on the visual changes, how the developers would integrate into games. They didn't really talk in any detail about the performance side of things, outside of continuing to claim that it will run on a single GPU. I think the wording that they used was efficient VRAM allocation, which potentially means this will require quite a bit of VRAM, but not necessarily all of the VRAM on a 5090.
yeah, I mean, saying it'll run on a single GPU, what could that possibly mean?
I mean, my immediate reaction when I saw that to begin with was, this is a 5090 only type of situation, because the original demo was two 5090s, one to run the game, one to run.
How could it mean anything else?
Well, I don't expect it to run that. I mean, I don't know whether they'll allow people to run it on lower tier GPUs, but there's run and there's run, right? Like kind of like you can use path tracing on a 5050.
Mhm,
You actually
mhm,
you kind of can't, but
mhm.
it's an option you can turn on. So I think that's probably what they'll mean.
Yep. Well, anyway, like I said, from the start, I'll reserve my judgment, obviously, until we actually test it for ourselves and see what it's like, which is what we did with ray tracing, and we continue to evaluate that every single step of the way.
Hmm.
And here we are all these years later. So, yeah,
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
not like
I,
you. I'm not terribly excited for it because I don't think it's going to ultimately mean too much for gamers, at least at this point in time.
yeah, some of the examples outside of the faces that they sort of showed, it felt very much to me like the days of ray traced global illumination when that was coming in. You've got one image, and it's sort of the lighting in image A, for example, and then you've got kind of like the DLSS 5 on image, which is kind of like lighting version B. And I sort of look at the two versions, and I'm like, okay, like they're different. Like clearly they look different. Is version A lighting or version B lighting the better version? And then you're sort of getting into sort of, subjective, is this or that more preferable or more pleasing to the eye? One of the examples, I think they've got this fruit example where they're sort of, I think they showed this in the original demo as well. They've re-shown it here. There's this scene with all these different items on a table. There's like grapes and stuff and a watermelon and whatever. And it's like the DLSS 5 off version is like this flat lighting, not too much shadows, that sort of thing. It's very sort of gamer sort of looking like. And then they turn on DLSS 5 and there's like, it's more contrasty, more shadows, that sort of thing. I'm like, okay, like version A lighting, the DLSS 5 off lighting, it's not like we haven't seen shadows or deeper shadows or more contrasting games before. And certainly people have been adding that in with reshade. Now, is this a quote unquote more accurate or more realistic version of a filter like that? We'll have to wait and see what it looks like and make our call on that in the final version of the game, right? But it has but a lot of what they've shown so far in this latest presentation, as I was sort of skimming through, it has once again that sort of feel. And you know how the other day we were talking, in maybe it was the previous podcast or a couple of podcasts ago, about how a lot of gamers feel like graphics have peaked. Like that is not an important improvement for them for the next generation of games. People aren't really going crazy for next generation visuals. And I feel like things that make games that are more performance intensive, but just sort of change the way games look, is not going to have an overly positive reaction. People will want their games to run, especially if you can't buy hardware, right? Like people want their
Mm.
games to run better. People are very accepting of current game visuals, and that's kind of this challenge that Nvidia has with DLSS 5. It may do all these cool things, but if gamers are sort of pulling back on the need for more visuals, then this feature is going to fall flat, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think gamers would only accept going from 120, 130, 140 FPS down to maybe 60 FPS if the game was just night and day different. Like we went from
Hmm.
good graphics, modern graphics at 120 to your mind is completely and utterly blown at 60
Hmm.
FPS. The game just looks that much better, that much immersive. You could accept the higher latency, sort of worse feel of the game. And yeah, I mean, visually, 60 FPS doesn't look too bad. I know there'll be people like, what are you talking about? Um, but 120 FPS, for example, is much smoother than 60. It just is. But
Mm.
we don't want to get into that debate. It was actually funny on that note on your configuring, adrenaline software,
Hmm.
because there was a couple of people that said, "Oh my god, I bought a high refresh rate monitor, Tim, and
As
it's
always,
only
yeah.
been at 60 hertz." Remember we talked, and again, we're not picking on those people because it's not something that you would just inherently know. Uh, and sometimes it does default to the correct, the maximum refresh rate of the monitor. I think Radeon GPUs tend to do that better than GeForce GPUs, if I'm not mistaken. But we talked about ages ago, we see all these comments where people are like, I bought a high refresh rate monitor after all the hype about how it's better and this and that, and it's no different. It's just a scam. Like, it's no different at all. And I'm sitting there scratching my head thinking, I've got a dual monitor system here, two exactly of the same monitors, one set to 60 hertz. I did this with Zoe the other day. I set one to 60 and one to, I think it was 140. And she's on the Windows desktop, just moving the mouse around. And straight away, she's like, oh, yeah, this one's much smoother, much faster than that one. And I'm like, yeah, I can see that. And I feel it instantly. If one of my monitors defaults to 60 hertz, it's like, oh, what's happening here? So, yeah, that explains it, right? A lot of those people, and we said this back then, we have to believe they haven't actually increased the refresh rate. And, there are people that are admitting that was the case, which is, fine. Mistakes like that can happen easily enough. But anyway, I thought that was funny to see those comments in 2026 on a video you released, last week or whatever it was.
I think another interesting angle with this DLSS 5 stuff is, the whole developer side of things, because obviously they've given these, examples of sliders and things like that. And they're sort of saying, developers can go through and they can use this and change the model on different objects or different scenes. And you can go through and tweak the various different sliders on every single object in the game and that sort of thing. But ultimately, if what we're seeing is sort of these lighting changes, right? You've got version A, version B lighting. You can say one lighting is subjectively better than the other. If developers are having to go through and tweak this on each individual object in the game, each individual scene, is this going to be just a less efficient way of...
It's a lot of touch-up work.
Yeah, like there's artists in games already who are employed to design the lighting of games, like design the shadowing, design the surface interactions with elements. And I guess this is presented as sort of these easy sliders potentially. I'm not a game developer, so I'm not entirely sure what sort of work is required to implement these sorts of things. But first of all, they're already having to do this because they're already having to design the lighting, because DLSS 5 requires existing lighting in the games to work off of. That's entirely what they've said from the start. This only applies on top of the existing scene that is presented. And they claim that by using things like ray tracing and path tracing, the data into DLSS 5 is better. And so they can do more accurate processing or whatever. But it still means that a lighting artist has to go through and create each scene. And so effectively, DLSS 5 is doubling or increasing the work of these developers.
Yeah. I expect this to be absolute shambles when it first comes out, like DLSS was. Like, you're going to see major discrepancies in characters, presentation, and I don't know. I could be wrong, but my expectation is shambles.
Yeah, I mean, I've sort of, with ray tracing, this argument was used at the time, was sort of like, this will make developers' lives easier. You turn on ray tracing, it just works, and it can apply across the scene. Developers don't have to manually bake lighting anymore. They can use this one-click tool. And at the time, sure, that was kind of a future-looking thing. Once games became ray tracing only, there was this transition period where, developers still had to make the rasterized version of the game because the ray tracing version didn't run on most cards. So it was kind of a duplication of work, similar to what I was describing with DLSS 5, right? You have to make the raster version, then you have to retouch the entire game for ray tracing. Over time, you can see a path to them not having to do the raster work and only having to do this supposedly easier ray tracing work. But with DLSS 5, what we're sort of looking at least with this version, again, maybe they'll be able to improve this to take some completely ridiculous garbage-looking scene and make a complete scene like we're seeing now. But this appears to be work duplication in a way that will not be able to be easily not work duplication. You have to make the scene in the ray tracing. You have to put all the lighting, establish everything in the ray trace scene. Then you have to tweak all the DLSS 5 settings on top of that as sort of this second pass, especially if you can't run the DLSS 5 version on a lot of games. So that is something that certainly concerns me. And when you sort of bring up, it's going to look maybe quite different in different scenes and that sort of thing. Yeah, obviously there's some games that are very complex that have lots of different scenes, lots of different objects in them, different lighting, different conditions, dynamic time of day, all that sort of thing. And so now developers have to go through and tweak these sliders for every single scene in every single part of their game in these massively complex games that are costing hundreds of millions of dollars to make. That doesn't seem like a particularly attractive proposition to developers, in my opinion. I would think that they'd be wanting to not use this feature and sort of save development resources. We talk about, like, would you rather optimize your game for 8 gigabyte GPUs and have to do all that refactoring optimization work, or optimize your game for DLSS 5 if you've got limited resources? Like, which one would you pick?
Mm-hmm. Yep, I totally agree. There's also the issue of, a lot of YouTubers now are starting to use like the YouTube generated thumbnails, like the AI thumbnails.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I'm not talking about like using some AI assets or like coming up with your own like creative AI thumbnail. I'm talking about like they actually that you'll see the text
one
is
click.
the same.
Yeah.
They're sort of a darker looking thumbnail. Not throwing shade at Jay, but I'm pretty sure Jay's 2 cents has been using them for a while now. So if you look at his thumbnails, it's that look, and you'll see so many channels now with that. It's become a generic look. I mean, there's no better term for it. So many YouTubers are now using these AI generated thumbnails through, I think it's through YouTube, I'm not 100% sure. They all look very similar. Like channels are now blending into other channels. Like I'm mixing. I have to actually look and see which channels which
100% agree with you on that.
Yeah. And I feel like DLSS 5 is going to do this to a lot of games because, there's like games that look good, like a Crisis, and then there's another game that looks good, but they're distinctively different. Like they look good in different ways.
They've got art direction, right? It's like how movies, for example, filmed in real life a lot of the time, but not all movies look the same. They're filmed outdoors, but one movie looks different to another movie because a person employed to design the lighting and look of the game makes up what they want to do in the final version. And what you're saying is exactly what happens.
Yeah, so I feel like you're just going to get a lot of these DLSS 5 enabled games that all look much the same. And I think it's, going to create this sort of generic look.
Well, that was the issue with the original presentation, right? They showed multiple outdoor scenes. I think they had Assassin's Creed Shadows, and I think it was Oblivion Remastered and a few of those. And they all applied sort of this like...
the same filter.
This same filter, this same sheen to it, the same bright white reflective surfaces. And those games look very distinct, in my opinion, based on the before version, the pre-DLSS version. So that's obviously a concern. And then one of the things that actually concerned me as well, looking through the details from this presentation, was Nvidia sort of describing how it works. And so I'm just going to read part of what was listed on video cards, which I think has a great summary of this. They were saying that video generation models usually process multiple frames together, but a game must respond to input to the player immediately, basically. DLSS 5 operates causally, processing one frame at a time without looking at future frames. NVIDIA uses motion vectors and other engine data to reduce shimmering, drifting, and swimming between frames. So essentially what that's saying is most of what DLSS 5 is doing is taking what it's currently seeing and applying the filter to what it's currently seeing. It has some motion vector data like you would see from other forms of DLSS, so it's able to go, well, I'm getting this information that this object that was in a previous frame is now in this position via motion vectors and other engine data like potentially depth maps and that sort of thing. It's getting all that data, but what it's not potentially getting is, let's say you exit a room and then you go back into the room later. Now, is it going to give you the exact same look of those objects in the game? Or potentially, maybe it is able to do that under the exact same lighting conditions because of how it works. But what if you exit the room, it's a dynamic time of day game, you come back, it's an hour later, the lighting has changed slightly. Are all the objects going to look the same then? Because the lighting has changed, it's giving you different inputs into the DLSS 5 algorithm. Same with faces. Is that face going to look exactly the same between lighting scene to lighting scene? I know they've got these different models that they can use. The models do give a slightly different look, but is that going to apply in all the different conditions that you see? And obviously it's going to be problematic if you see you're sort of shifting around your field of view or you're moving from one place to another place and you're seeing slight differences every single time. Like that is not a good user experience, in my opinion. You certainly wouldn't want games where, you're not seeing exactly what you should be seeing because there's slight changes because it's doing this neural processing. So that's a really interesting, I guess, aspect of how it works. We'll have to see how it goes and whether it's able to keep this stability between frames.
Yeah, well, that's the shambles I'm expecting when I said that. So we'll see.
Yeah, so it's really very different to the DLSS technologies that we've gotten so far. Upscaling, it really is just a one-click feature. Developers can enable it in their games, integrate it, and then it applies evenly across every single scene. You don't really need to go and tweak anything per scene. And it does a really great job. Like you're not sitting there going, wow, in that one particular lighting scene, upscaling was significantly worse than in this other scene. That's not a typical experience. And same with frame generation. It kind of just does what it does. There's no real need for developers to go in and tweak things too much once you've integrated it. But DLSS 5 is sort of like this massive paradigm shift where it seems to be using a similar sort of inputs to do this filtering, but the developers have to go through and change it in every single scene. So it's no longer this one click, every game is going to be implementing this sort of thing. And certainly if they, I guess, do a simple job, they just click it on, enable it for the whole game, you might be seeing quite weird outputs. So I don't know. I am still like, I think the examples that they showed, to be fair to NVIDIA in this presentation, are more acceptable in the way that they look. They're not as AI slop looking. They don't have that effect to them in some of the scenes that they showed relative to the original presentation. So toning down the amount that DLSS 5 does appears to do a better job based on the examples that they've shown. But I'm still not like wildly excited about what they've shown because, as I said, you tone down the effect, it tones down the changes, it makes it less useful. So there's a lot that we'll have to see in how DLSS 5 will be integrated to games, but it's still expected to be shipped in the next couple of months, scheduled for this fall in North America or the Northern Hemisphere, of course. So it's not far away. All right. That'll do it for our main topics. Do you want to take a break? We'll come back and talk about our boring lives. All right, and we're back. Kick off the boring life section, Steve.
Yeah, well, I have done, well, to me, this is exciting life stuff, but I guess to some people, buying power tools might be boring life. So depending on who you are, this could be exciting or boring. For me personally, exciting. But bit of a story here. This is actually an interesting customer support thing, which it's kind of it's a good story. So as I guess a bit of backstory here. I have a lot of DeWalt tools. I love doing handyman stuff around the property, and I've got a 5-acre property. My wife and I enjoy working on that. So that's why I have tools and why I'm into tools and doing all that sort of stuff. And you've started to do that a bit as well yourself, haven't you, Tim? You've got a few DeWalt tools now, and I learnt today that DeWalt or this what is it, the Stanley Group, Black & Decker Stanley Group, they now own Hustler as well. So lawnmowers, they own them, apparently. I just discovered that today. So there's a little tidbit for you.
Similar sort of color, so that makes sense.
Well, yeah, that's yeah. So anyway, about 10 years ago, I bought a DeWalt 54-volt chainsaw. It was their first ever one. It was the DCM 575, and I would say it was pretty mid. Like, it was exciting when I got it. It worked well, but it did leak a lot of bar oil, so that was a pain in the backside.
I think I remember you saying something about the oil leak problem.
Yeah, used to a lot of bar oil leakage from it, so you couldn't leave bar oil in there. It just leaked out till it was empty, so that's not great. Whereas my Stihl chainsaw, I could leave the bar oil in that for years and it didn't leak any of it. So bar oil was a common problem. I Googled it. Heaps of people complained about that. The chain used to jam a bit, and I had to hold down like the safety bar on it, otherwise it wouldn't engage the motor after a while. So I did and I used it reasonably heavily for a few years. Nothing on it really fully broke, but it got to the point where it was janky and just annoying to use. And I bought it through I think it's Total Tools, and they didn't really want to warranty it because they were like, oh, it still sort of works, you've just got to do this. And the customer support there wasn't great. So they basically just didn't want to help me with it. So I ended up just using the petrol-powered one for the most part. Anyway, fast forward about 10 years. They've released models since then, and their new model has reviewed quite well. So I thought maybe I'll get a new one because being winter now, we've had quite a few gum trees lose branches and things, and there was a bit of cleaning up to do. And I generally only get out the Stihl petrol-powered one for the really big jobs. It's kind of a pain in the butt to deal with all of that if you've just got to start it up for like 5 minutes. So I missed the electric chainsaw because, I've got the reciprocating saw, which is good if it's about as thick as your wrist, but once it gets like thicker than your leg, you really want a proper chainsaw. So anyway, I thought, you know what? I'm going to go, we got a new local Sydney tool store now. So I thought I'll go down there and buy the new DeWalt. You're going to like this, Tim. It's like monitor names. It's the DCM CS575N-XE.
That's bad.
So
yeah, it's real bad.
It's the new 54 volt XR Flex Volt lithium ion cordless brushless 500 millimeter 20-inch chainsaw. So they had a sale down there. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to go get myself a chainsaw. So I head down there. It's always a bit exciting for me to go down to like Sydney Tools and have a look at all the tools down there. And I went down the DeWalt aisle and there was 2 DeWalt reps there, which the guys from Sydney Tools said, I'll go down the DeWalt aisle, the DeWalt reps there, they'll help you out and point in the right direction. So I'm like, all right, whatever. Kind of knew what I wanted. But as soon as I went down the aisle, these 2 DeWalt reps came up to me and they were really friendly, wanted to have a chat about the tools. So I thought, you know, whatever, I've got time. So I had a bit of a chat with them. So we sort of got chatting about the tools and they said to me, oh, you know, have you tried this tool out? I'm like, yeah, I've already got that one. And they said, what about this one? I said, yeah, I've got that one. And that sort of was a reoccurring theme for a little while. And they're like, oh, gee, you have a lot of DeWalt tools. I said, yeah, I have a lot of DeWalt tools. And I don't know if they believed that I had all the tools that I was saying I had. And in the end, I said, oh, actually, I've got a video here that I just took for a mate who's an electrician. Anyway, I played the little video of my shed with all my DeWalt tools and they were like, holy crap. I don't think we've ever seen anything like that before. So they were quite impressed. And the guy's like, I've got to give you some free like merch and stuff. So they gave me some t-shirts and that. And so I'm just a regular, you know, guy off the street that I, you know, they were really friendly, really helpful. They gave me some free merch and that, and they gave me a discount on the chainsaw. And then he handed me his business card and he said, oh, if you have any problems with this or whatever, any other tools, just contact me directly and I'll sort you out. I thought, oh, that's pretty cool. And I said to him, actually, I bought the gurney. So there's the DeWalt pressure washer. I'll try and get the version for you. It's
I'm
the
sure this model name's going to be so bad.
It's the DCMPW 1600N-XE. So it's their 1600 PSI pressure washer, which people complain about, oh, 1600 PSI, that's garbage, but it's brilliant for cleaning cars. Now, the cool thing about, you've used like gurneys, pressure washers, cartridges, that kind of stuff before, right?
Yep.
Pain in the ass to get it out. Like you just get to the point where you can't be bothered getting out to wash the car because you got to get like a power cord. You got to run that. You got to connect the hose to it, and then you sort of drag it around the car, and it gets stuck on things, and you know the power cord attaches or whatever, or you know, it's a pain in the butt. So DeWalt released a cordless one, which you can chuck 2 18-volt batteries in, and if you do the 54-volt flex batteries, you get like the 9 amp hour runtime off them, and so you can do multiple car washes off a pair of batteries, and so there's no power cords involved at all, and it can even siphon the water out of a bucket. So, you know, 1600 PSI is plenty for washing a car. Otherwise, you're just going to risk blowing the paint off it. So I got that and absolutely fell in love with it. Great tool. After about 6 months, it just stopped working. So the motor would spin up, and it would just do the, like, you know, you'd get that sort of sound where it's just like not pressurizing. And I tried everything, you know, short of pulling the entire thing apart because, you know, I had my warranty. So anyway, I did the warranty process. They took the machine, and in the end, it was a motor failure, apparently. Even though I could hear the motor working, but whatever, there was clearly something wrong there. So they replaced that, got it back. It was working again. I'd missed it dearly. And I was back to, you know, doing the snow foam and stuff on the car and cleaning it with it. And it was happy days for 2 weeks. I fire it up, go to clean my car. I'm like, oh. So thankfully I took a video of it because I was pretty pissed off. And I showed it to the DeWalt rep and he's like, oh, that's not good enough. You know, but I'll say no more. I'll take care of it. So I left it with him. And I thought, oh, yeah, because, you know, when you usually run into those like sales guys and stuff, they talk up a storm. But he did give me his like mobile number and stuff, something. And that's kind of weird if he's talking BS, but he gives me like, you know, his mobile number and that. So anyway, and he gave me his email address. So I sent him an email. And anyway, he turned up to my house in the official DeWalt van and got me a brand new one, just replaced it like that. So that was pretty cool.
Nice. That's pretty good. Well, I guess if you spend however much you've spent on DeWalt tools and you get a DeWalt guy randomly at the store,
Yeah,
some
I mean,
perks.
I didn't really have to prove it to him or anything, and I didn't drop the YouTuber angle or anything. I mean, not that there's overlap with what we do, right? Like, I'm not gonna.
Though they are getting some nice free promotion right now.
Well, I mean, to be fair, I've bought. I don't know how much money I've spent on DeWalt tools, tens of thousands of dollars over the years. Like, realistically, in Australian dollars, it would be over $50,000 that I would have spent over the course of 20 years on their tools. And I've done a lot of stuff with them. Like, they've saved me a ton of money, and I've helped a lot of people with them. So I've rarely had a problem with their stuff. And when I have had to warranty things, I've not had a problem. Like, I've warranted a few batteries and stuff, no dramas there. Just the pressure washer was a pain in the butt because I had to, before we only just got our local store, mind you, which I didn't purchase through. So the store I purchased it from is an hour and a half from my house. So you got to drive an hour and a half, fill out the warranty stuff. They send it off, takes a couple of weeks, gets back, and then you got to, do another 3-hour round trip to get it back. So that wasn't a super fun time. And then having to do that again 2 weeks later. So the fact that they took care of it, got me a brand new one and brought it out. And they said, if this ever breaks, we'll come pick it up and that. So I'm not telling people this is expect this service from DeWalt. It's just, it's extremely rare without using like YouTuber privilege that you have a company that you've essentially supported. We were talking earlier about LG products. Like, you're giving these companies money. They're providing a product. It's kind of like this should be this beneficial exchange where they get to make a product, they want to sell it to you, you agree to buy it from them. Everyone should be happy there. And I've been doing that with DeWalt now for 2 decades. And I currently have a lot of their current lineup. So a lot of the previous tools I've bought, I've now given away. Like, I gave the kid across the road, I gave thousands of dollars of tools to him because he was starting out as a plumber. And I had the previous older tools I didn't need anymore. So I thought that'll get him started. And he was really happy with that. So anyway, it was really cool to finally run into someone at a company that was like, oh, you're a loyal customer. We'll actually look after you. That's it. Basically, in my experience, does not happen. So that was really cool. I'm not going to name the names of the guys at DeWalt just because, I haven't run that by them. So I don't know if they're happy to be named, and I don't want to potentially get them into trouble. I don't think they're doing anything wrong by helping me in the way they have. I would certainly put in a good word for them with their higher ups and whatnot, but they've been very friendly, very helpful. And yeah, it's kind of convenient now that there is a store. So my house is a minor detour. It's not too bad if they're coming, because previously they would have had to drive many hours out of their way to come to me. So, timing worked out well there. Anyway, but a rare, great customer experience with a company. Again, I'm not saying don't expect to go down and buy like a DeWalt chainsaw and have them come and deliver it for you and offer you that sort of support. But, at least in this example, if you've been a customer for decades and spent tons of money on their tools, and you run into the right people, and that's what we've talked about with all these companies, right? Like, all of these companies can suck and do have the potential to be awesome. And you and I know that better than most people because, we've dealt with companies who have sucked, and then an extremely competent person who cares about doing their job well stepped in, and overnight they've just become the best company to deal with. And that can happen. You could walk into a retail store and get somebody like that who wants to really help the customer. And I'll probably save this. Well, I will save this bad customer story for another podcast. But I recently had bad dealings with BMW, and it was basically because the person who I ran into there just didn't want to help me. Like, I didn't buy the car directly
so
through
frustrating.
them.
Yeah.
As soon as I walk in as well, it's like I booked the appointment and she's all smiley and friendly. And how can I help you? And it's all going well. And then she's like, so did you purchase the car through us? And I'm like, no. And she's like, oh, okay. Oh. Like, the tone just changed straight away. And then it was like, oh yeah, well, we'll let you know. Anyway, that was a terrible it went badly, that one. I got a good result in the end by going elsewhere, but yeah. I've had plenty of bad customer support issues over the years. Anyway, that's pretty much that story. I don't think there's anything else to it was exciting for me. Got my chainsaw delivered, and it works a treat, I guess I should say. I've actually used the chainsaw and it is a weapon. Really impressive. I've had it for a few weeks now. I've used it a few times. It is obviously a new tool, so it's hard to give a proper rating on how reliable it is and how well it does work. But with a new blade and brand new out of the box, absolute monster, cuts like a dream, and it hasn't leaked a drop of bar oil. So the other one started leaking pretty much straight away. This one hasn't dropped a drop. So far so good. Well, hopefully that remains the case. We'll see. I'll be using it a lot through spring, and I'll be able to give an update in a couple of months' time.
Well, my boring life story for this week is that I finished the game Lego Batman Legacy of the Dark Knight.
You've been working hard like me.
Well, yeah, it's not a particularly long game. So yeah. I've got a kid now, so game time has been reduced, but still managed to play the old Lego Batman while she's been sleeping. So yeah, I bought a copy of this game, not because I was super interested in it. It sort of popped up out of nowhere, but we did some coverage of it on Hardware Unboxed because of the whole system specifications thing, frame generation. I thought it would run badly, that sort of thing. We did a whole video on that and sort of looked at it. And so I had a copy of the game, and I thought, you know what? I've liked Lego games in the past. Batman's a cool character. Why not? I'll give this game a go. And as I was playing it, and as reviewers alluded to sort of when the game came out in May, is that this is sort of a mixture of the Lego games, if you've played them previously, with the Batman Arkham games. And the Batman Arkham series from what it would have been around the 2010 sort of time period with Arkham Asylum and Arkham Knight and those sort of games. Yeah, some of my favorite sort of superhero stealth action games. I loved those games when they came out. And so, yeah, this game borrows a lot from those titles. They actually had some Rocksteady developers work on Legacy of the Dark Knight. So Rocksteady made the Batman Arkham series. And while this Lego Batman game is made by TT Games, the people that make a lot of the other Lego games, Rocksteady did help out with some of the aspects, I think, relating to the combat. So essentially, this is like a Lego sort of, Lego game, sort of a bit humorous. They try to do some funny scenes and stuff, play into the whole, it's Lego sort of angle, but it has, an open world Gotham City. It has a lot of combat that's very similar to the Batman Arkham games, as I mentioned. It's got a lot of the, I guess, puzzles and things that you would see in those games. The Batman Arkham series had lots of Riddler puzzles, for example. There's Riddler puzzles in the Lego Batman Legacy of the Dark Knight, and the wide variety of villains that you see. I think Batman has, some of the most unique and interesting villains. Obviously, you got Penguin, Poison Ivy, Ra's al Ghul, Bane, those sort of guys, all throughout the game, all coming into it. And there's scenes based on all the various different Batman movies, if you've watched them. So, The Dark Knight, the more recent The Batman, Batman Returns from back in the 90s and that sort of thing, all spread throughout the story. So, yeah, I was actually very impressed with this game. Okay. I wasn't expecting much from it. Lego games, can be just sort of, they do their thing well. They do Lego stuff, but they're not like, whoa, I'd go out recommending those to people. I actually would recommend this if you liked the Arkham series, but sort of also have a fleeting interest in the Lego style. It is a little different to some of the previous Lego games where, for example, the Skywalker Saga, the Star Wars version, you go around collecting all the different characters, the minifigs, and you can sort of play as any of them throughout the story. In this version, there's, I think, just 8 characters that you sort of unlock, each with unique individual abilities and things like that you need to use to progress through the story and the challenges and that sort of thing. So you don't go and collect all the villains and that sort of thing and are able to play as them, which is a little disappointing. But with the sort of main characters, they're all unique and interesting, and they've sort of integrated that well enough. So from a gameplay side of things, I think that works out really well. The PC version as well, there's some interesting things happening with this version. The first thing is that it actually looks really good. Much better looking than previous Lego games. And I think one of the things that helps out a lot here is both improvements to lighting quality and also texture quality. So you'd think, a Lego game, Lego bricks are just basic plastic, like they're kind of flat and boring looking. But in this game, there's a lot of, unlike Batman's sort of mask minifig headpiece that you'd see, if you actually get one of those Lego pieces in real life, it's not just smooth plastic. There is some like fine micro texturing on it. There's sort of this manufacturing seams. The models in the game have these elements in them. So they're sort of getting the Lego bricks looking closer to what you would see from real life Lego bricks. A lot of nice rain effects on a lot of, because the entire game's at night, basically, Gotham City, dark, spooky sort of environment. A lot of it's raining, lots of wet effects. It looks, it's a phenomenal looking game in that sense. So for the style that they were going for, a Lego game, it looks really good. And, it is an Unreal Engine 5 game. So there are, things in that engine that can make games look good, and they've utilized them for this title. Of course, that has some performance implications. It's not the best running game. The open world segments do have noticeable traversal stutter throughout the entire game. Wasn't something I was ever able to resolve or anything. It wasn't VRAM related. I was playing on a 4090, so plenty of VRAM. The game can allocate quite a bit of VRAM so that it's loading in those nice quality textures throughout the world. And so, the some of the missions, they're not in the open world. They run fine. But once you get out to the open world, performance could have done with, in my opinion, quite a bit more optimization. But the game looks good. And as we sort of showed in the hardware unbox coverage, it also scales down quite a way as well. So you can turn off a lot of those advanced lighting effects. You can turn down the texture quality, and it will look a lot more simple, but it does run at a higher frame rate. The traversal stutter thing may not be fixed if you do that, but the visuals, there is some scalability there. But I was impressed with this game. I'd recommend it to people, as I said, if you played it. And the PC version, outside of the traversal stutter, is quite impressive if you start playing it with all the graphic settings turned up, highest quality textures, HDR enabled, all that sort of thing. So, I enjoyed it. That's it for my Legacy of the Dark Knight sort of discussion. And that's all I've really been doing outside of the work that you would have seen on the Hardware Unbox channel and Monitor Unbox, sort of monitor testing at the moment. So that's keeping me busy. But that pretty much does it. Let's wrap up the podcast episode. There's not too much more to talk about. So thanks to everyone that's listened to the end. As always, if you want to support Hardware Unboxed, the podcast, we do have Patreon. If you sign up to that, you gain access to the ad-free version, the supporter feed, which is, I guess, a more nice way to listen to the podcast. It comes out slightly early on there as well. We just publish it when it's ready up on there. And you get all the other benefits, Discord community, live streams, which I think we'll be doing pretty soon by the sounds of things. So we'll get into that. And so thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week for another episode.